Hello again. I have the pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of today's program, Rachel A. Carpenter. Rachel is a national leader in transportation safety, known for turning bold policies into real results. She served as Caltrans' first Chief Safety Officer, and then as the interim Deputy Secretary for Safety at the California State Transportation Agency, also known as CalSTA, advancing the state's safe system approach. She also championed pedestrian, bicycle, and road safety through roles at the U.S. Safe System Consortium and Transportation Research Board committees. She joins us today to speak on safety and the safe systems approach. Please join me in welcoming Rachel.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is so nice to see familiar faces and new friends and to be back on the UC Davis campus. And it's really especially meaningful to follow Professor Kendall. While I was in grad school, she taught one of my graduate courses on life cycle assessment. And it was through that course, one of the first times that I realized the system impacts of every decision that we make, much beyond the individual project. And I know she had to run, but I want to publicly congratulate her for her appointment as director of the Institute of Transportation Studies. It's really such an incredible and well-deserved milestone. So when I was a master's student here at UC Davis, I spent long nights coding the shortest path algorithms and calibrating car following models. And I can still remember the satisfaction of watching a simulated freeway stabilize. Every vehicle finding its place and every flow neatly resolved. But I never modeled people walking. I never modeled people biking. And it wasn't because I didn't care, but it was because the system didn't ask me to. The equations, the data, the software, they were all built around vehicles. Efficiency for cars was the metric for success. Well, fast forward to today, as Caltrans' Chief Safety Officer, I see that gap across the US in how our transportation system has been built, in the tools and metrics that we use, and sometimes even how we define success. Because when someone walking or biking can do everything right, wait for the signal, use the crosswalk, wear a helmet, and still not make it home, that's not random. And that's the reason that I do this work, because no one should have to be perfect to make it home safely. For most of the past century, as you likely know, we optimized for movement. Faster, smoother, longer distance travel. And to be fair, that era of engineering delivered incredible mobility and economic opportunity. But it also embedded risk. Risk that shows up in 1 in 4 Californians who are killed while walking or biking. Risk that shows up in parents not letting their children walk to school. And risk that shows up in neighborhoods where the system quietly tells people, you don't belong here unless you're in a car. The exciting thing is that our field is changing. We're moving beyond mobility at any cost. We're recognizing that the real measure of a transportation system isn't how fast it moves vehicles, but how safely it moves people. And that's at the heart of the safe system approach. It's not a checklist, it's a philosophy, a redefinition of success. And it says, people make mistakes, human bodies are fragile, and the system must protect them anyway. The safe system approach is grounded in physics, in kinetic energy, and in public health science and prevention. It forces us to move from reaction to anticipation. And it also gives us a simple, actionable lens to manage risk. Manage exposure, so reduce how often and how far people have to travel and the potential for harm. Manage likelihood, so design to reduce the chances that a conflict even occurs. And manage severity, so ensure that crashes, when a crash does happen, which is inevitable, the forces stay within the human tolerance. So that framework, exposure, likelihood, and severity, needs to help every decision maker, from the planners to the designers to operators, focus on what really truly matters, preventing death and serious injury before it happens. And when we apply that lens to walking and biking, it changes everything. We stop asking, how do we get people to behave better? And instead, we ask, how do we design the system to be more forgiving? It means we design intersections where a split-second lapse doesn't end a life. We set human-tolerant target speeds that match what the body can withstand. And we build complete and protected networks so that people walking and biking are physically separated from higher speed traffic. We rethink land use and access decisions so that unnecessary exposure to risk just simply doesn't happen. And from the beginning, equity has to be built in. Like Director Taylor said, because communities that rely the most on walking, biking, and transit are too often the ones still that carry the greatest safety burden. A safe system is one that protects everyone. It's about making safety the system's property, not just the individual's burden. And we're bringing that perspective to scale in California. I am so excited to announce that last week, the new Secretary's Policy on Road Safety was issued jointly by the California State Transportation Agency and California Health and Human Service Agency, where we declared that road safety is a public health responsibility. The policy sets an interim goal, the first time we've had one in safety in the state, a 30% reduction in fatal and serious injuries by 2035. And it directs every CalSTA department to embed the safe system approach in its work. So for Caltrans, that means safety isn't a project feature, it's an operating condition. We're rewriting design standards to focus on place first, roadway second, to ensure that the design responds to the context and the people that it serves. We're partnering with SafeTrack to develop target speed guidance that aligns the roadway's physical design with the intended speed for that context. And we're building proactive safety improvement programs for each of our 12 districts around the state. We're also working with partners to align funding around prevention and not reaction. But none of this matters if it doesn't reach the street. If the experience of safety doesn't reach the people walking to the bus stop, biking to work, or crossing to school. That's where implementation happens, and it needs to happen in every city, every county, every jurisdiction that's represented here and beyond. And that's why gatherings like this matter so much, because each one of you, whether you're an engineer or a planner, an advocate or a public health professional, play a role in translating the shift into reality. When I worked as Caltrans Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety Branch Chief, I spent a lot of time staring at maps. Those were maps filled with dots, where each dot represented a serious injury or a fatality. Each dot represented a life that was changed forever. And those maps taught me two things. The first thing was that data is really powerful. It can help us see patterns that we can act on. But second, data can also hide the human story if we let it. Behind every dot is a person, a family, a moment that may have been able to be prevented. Now, as Chief Safety Officer, my job is to connect those dots to every decision that we make, from our project selection, to our maintenance schedules, to our performance metrics. Because safety isn't a program, but it really must be embedded in every corner of every organization. And I think that that's the next frontier for all of us. We have a growing foundation of research, of evidence, of proven strategies. We'll always need to deepen our understanding and refine our tools. But at the same time, we know enough today to act with confidence. What we need now is persistence, the will to make safety the default, to make the system self-enforcing, and to make sure every funding decision and every standard across the state reflects what we know, that speed and separation save lives. When I think back to those simulations I built here at UC Davis, the shortest path algorithm and the car following code, I realized what I was really modeling was predictability, perfect logic, controlled behavior. And that's not how people move through the world. Real streets are messy. People are distracted. They're tired. They make unpredictable choices because the environment may not give them good ones. That's why we can't expect perfection. We have to continue to design for forgiveness. And that's what makes this work both a multidisciplinary challenge and a moral one. We're at a moment of alignment in California. The Secretary's policy gives us a framework. The data gives us urgency. And gatherings like this give us momentum. Here in Davis, it's easy to see what's possible, a place where walking and biking feel safe and normal and convenient. So the question for all of us as we return home is how we take that feeling and we make it real everywhere. In the small towns, in the rural highways, and on the busy corridors where safety still feels out of reach. Our job is to make the sense of comfort and connection the norm, not the exception. Safety really isn't a constraint on progress. It's the purpose of it. And when we make walking and biking safe by design, we don't just prevent harm. We build the kind of communities that people want to live in. Thank you. I was told that there might be some questions, and apparently we are 40 minutes ahead of schedule, so. Yeah, so I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Yeah, but no hard ones, please.
Hi. I once asked Caltrans to provide a list of the places in the state highway system that had the most accidents with bicyclists and pedestrians, and they were very unwilling to provide it. Is that data readily available? And if not, will you commit to providing that?
I appreciate the question and your request. And I have to, before answering, correct your question. You asked about accidents, and one of the things that we're really trying to do is move to use the term crash. And that's because we know that
Fair enough.
crashes are, I don't have to go through the spiel. Okay.
As a cyclist, I've been hit 3 times by cars, understand.
And one who has had a concussion from being hit by a car, I completely hear you and feel that pain. We are still at a place at the department where we don't share the high collision concentration locations, those clusters, those dots on the map of fatal and serious injuries. And that is because when we identify those locations, we have a process in place to send them out for what we call traffic safety investigation. And then we determine if there's a fix to the roadway. And so we won't release them publicly because we're not done with our work. So at this point, we don't share our crash concentrations. We know that there's a movement that has been happening for a while among cities of identifying the high injury networks. We may get to that point at some time, but right now we're not quite there.
Hi, I'm Claire Glogly with the City of Santa Cruz. Thanks for your presentation. As a small to medium-sized California city with a Caltrans highway running through a main street, how do you see this change of policy, change of direction, moving towards better partnership between local agencies and Caltrans districts for when CAPM projects or other projects are coming through and being able to integrate more complete streets and safe systems approach into those projects?
Thank you for your question, and it's a really appropriate one. You may not know, but about 2/3 of all fatal and serious injuries in California occur on the local road network. So the state highway system only captures about 1/3. So when we talk about getting to zero by 2050 or a 30% reduction by 2035, it's really the local network that needs a focus. So the new policy on road safety that was issued jointly by the secretaries continues sort of our commitment to the safe system approach and embeds injury prevention focus. What I hope happens is that we're able to connect that high-level policy to the day-to-day work of not only the 22,000 that is Caltrans, but CalSTA departments and beyond. There is work that's been published that identifies a matrix, and I think that probably some of the authors are here. I know Julia from SafeTrack and Megan from Fair and Peers. Published that lays out a new sort of framework for how we look at improving locations, and it's based on context. So whether it's, we have a roadway that is more focused on local access, transition, or sort of mobility. And so your question falls in that like local access column. And what it does is it introduces certain tools that should be used in order to reduce severity, likelihood, and exposure, and then also build in redundancies. What I hope is that we're able to roll out that framework statewide to help everyone realize that context matters so much. And to your point, we want to make sure that the place function comes through really clearly, especially on those main streets that are, local access. So continue working with your District 5 office, and I hope that we're able to see some of those opportunities for improvement through CAPM or other programs, improve safety in your community.
Hi. My name is Peggy Martinez. I am an accessibility consultant and advocate. And I was in a presentation recently, by a Caltrans presentation recently, where the information was shared that the ADA program, so my question is kind of maybe a little bit two-part. One is that the ADA program primarily focuses on level changes and grade changes, slopes, ramps, and that kind of thing. And while it's extremely important, there are other aspects of safety that sort of equal, accessibility and safety sort of go hand in hand. And there are other aspects of accessibility that would be, in my opinion, really important to be considering with the ADA program. So I want to, I'll just try to keep it short, and I'm not doing a good job, but what I'm getting at is, how will Caltrans, as you move forward and as things, it does seem that things are being integrated more, and departments are sharing information, and so what I'm getting at is, how will other forms or other means of accessibility be considered in the realm of safety?
I said no hard questions. So accessibility and safety do go hand in hand, really. Accessibility, mobility, and safety. They're all intrinsically connected. So the ADA program is very specific and very focused in its scope. I don't see that program expanding to include much more than what it already does. I think that we try to keep in mind accessibility as we go about our safety improvement programs and projects. And I'm not sure what more we need to do in the accessibility realm. I don't have a ton of insight into maybe what specifics you're looking for. But I can tell you that we try to think about accessibility, safety, and mobility in all the projects that we do.
Hi, I'm Clarissa Cobbin-Sagan. I'm the ED of Silicon Valley Bike Coalition. So we cover San Mateo County, Santa Clara counties. We are home to the 3 deadliest roads in the Bay Area: El Camino Real, Monterey Road, and El Camino Real again. These are mostly state highways, or portions of which are state road and highway. It requires more than 15 agencies, cities, jurisdictions to collaborate on that approach. I think folks don't want dozens or hundreds of our members going to each city, sending inboxes to their capacity levels. How can Caltrans step up and the state step up so that comprehensively across the region, or at least in the Bay Area, we know where these are, we know when they are state highways? What's the better approach than our tactical approach to every city council meeting? And how can Caltrans have a better vision for collaborating with advocates like the Bike Coalition?
Thank you, and thanks for the work that you do. I know that Silicon Valley you have a lot of cities and counties and different stakeholders, and thank you. So I'll answer in a couple different ways. We have a really exciting sort of large project that's underway right now, and that is, we're calling it the Road Safety Infrastructure Plans. And what it is for the first time, the department has said, hey, we need to look at each of our 12 districts individually and identify the locations, essentially the high injury networks, for each district. That's different than what we historically have done, where we look at the whole state and pick out the either concentrations or corridors where we focus. So we're making the shift now to be more specific. So you're located in District 4, our Bay Area location, and so we will in the next year have a plan for how we, identifying those segments that either have a high concentration of crashes or risk-based issues. I would imagine that El Camino will come to the top. One of the focuses of the road safety infrastructure plans is to look at that interface between the state and the local network. And because El Camino is sort of like your classic Strode, it is a It isn't, it is a street and a road, and it is trying to be everything to everyone. It needs a lot of concentrated coordination and collaboration from a number of partners, like you mentioned. So I do have a lot of hope in this road safety infrastructure plan that's been created. My understanding now specifically on District 4 and specifically on El Camino is that there has been a coalition that's been in the works for a while and has sort of like visioned the corridor. So that's great that the cities and counties stepped up to do that. My understanding is also that our District 4 team has stepped in to make some improvements for vulnerable road users along that corridor. So I think what we need to do is to continue to work together and continue to try to improve safety and really, sort out what we want El Camino to do. So what is the intention behind the roadway? And in that way, then we'll be able to improve safety. So thank you for all your work. And I'm happy to continue to talk if you'd like.
Hello, I'm Bruce Doogie from Bike Walk Castro Valley, and I'm wondering in particular what Caltrans can do, especially with this, you said there was some kind of last week, some new policy, to get local municipalities to install better bicycle infrastructure. It seems like the main trade-off is parking versus better bike lanes. And it's a real frustration, our local municipality seems very resistant to remove parking to make better bike lanes. And so basically, what can you do to help us? Because they just want to put the absolute minimum sort of 5-foot bike lane in between a 7-foot parking lane and a 10-foot travel lane. So it's very frustrating and very dangerous for us. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the efforts that we kicked off last week, or CalSTA and Health and Human Services kicked off with the release of their policy, was a near-term implementation of the policy. So one sort of example, and that is what they're terming the State Priority Safety Corridor effort. Generally, what happens, or I guess historically, is that we look at the state highway system and we look at the local road network. And we say, okay, Caltrans is going to deal with the state highway system, and local agencies, cities, counties, MPOs, RTPAs, they're going to deal with the local network. Well, for the first time with the release of this corridor program, we've screened the entire state, so all public roads, not that separation between state highway system and the local network. And we've identified locations, so the state has identified locations that are on the local network that present some sort of safety challenge, whether that be crash-based or risk-based. So what I think, to answer your question, that we can do is we can continue that program and we can build on it so that we're looking at the state and we're saying this is the problem area, and the state is coming in to help the local agency with how to improve safety along that corridor. A lot of times it's not a local agency saying like, oh, I don't care about peds and bikes. I mean, maybe sometimes, but it's the funding, it's the expertise. Maybe you're in a small city and you have one engineer that works with you, that works for the city. So I think that having the state come in and help local agencies may really be a new model for safety. So I started my career after I left Davis for my master's, and worked for the city and county of San Francisco. And it was an amazing job. I got to design safe routes to school projects and bike lane projects. And one of the, as you can imagine, in San Francisco, where there's such constrained right-of-way, your point came up a lot. So that trade-off between implementing a bike facility and parking. And it's complicated. you have to do turnover and occupancy parking studies. You have to make sure that there's a balance between all modes. It's not easy to do, especially for those local agencies that are small. It's not even easy to do for a bigger local agency. So what I'd say is to continue to work with your local agency. Thank you for all the volunteering that you do for your local advocacy group. We have to all work together to improve safety, and I think that one of the things that I'm trying to do in sort of speaking engagements and talking points is move away from, is to share the things that really bring us together. The points that I made earlier on, everybody wants everybody to get home safely. So come at it from a sort of a safe system principle-based approach, because maybe that will resonate. Thanks for the question.
Hi, my name's Ian Winbrock. I'm with the City of Rancho Cordova, and I'm not a transportation planner or an advocate. I'm the public art guy. So it feels great to be surrounded by so many folks who are moving in the same direction. I was really inspired by your story because I'm thinking about the next generation of planners taught at UC Davis and how they're just going to have a different context and perspective. And I really appreciate your work that's focused on incrementalism, because I think that that's super unsexy mostly, but all of us in this room really want to be able to work together towards seeing a future in which this is without question. And so my context is one based mostly in ignorance, but I'm learning a lot. And I found Caltrans' public art transportation process to be rather unyielding. So I'm new to the game, so to speak, but I have wonderful colleagues and I'm super excited to make new relationships here. But my question to you is one of incrementalism. Because many of us are coming from different disciplines, how can I work with you and your colleagues to have process improvements within Caltrans be an ally from the outside, working in through appropriate channels, so that we can all work together towards incremental changes with respect to process to have more projects that improve safety?
Thank you. Thank you for the question and for the work that you do. As we're talking about sort of, I mentioned the matrix on, sort of local transition, mobility, that place component, when you look at place versus mobility, is so key to building communities that people want to be in. And a lot of that is art. Let's see how much to share. My mom was an art major, and I spent a lot of time going to museums, and I have a deep appreciation for especially public art. Through our Clean California program, I'd like to think that we've done a good job trying to build in more murals and art into the system. So I hope that that's been others' experiences. Incremental change is very important, and I'd like to think that we have processes that encourage that sort of dialogue. So Ali is very involved in sort of the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee at the department, and that's one great forum to get involved in to try to provide input on better processes. Also, I think sometimes just, your question was how to better work with Caltrans. Sometimes there's, it's a complicated organization. There's 22,000 people that work for the department. And so just figuring out where to go can be really mind-boggling sometimes. So I'm a resource. You can reach out to me to say, where do you want to, where should I go to give this input? But I think it's, just a process that we all need to continue to work on, is trying to continue the conversation and the collaboration between each other. Because I really do think that at the end of the day, we are all on the same page about sort of the highest level, the principles. Like, we want everyone to be safe, and safe is much more than just the data. It's also, like I was saying, like the feeling. And so much of that feeling is things like public art. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for this great Q&A. We do have folks joining us virtually who have provided some questions. And just want to remind everyone up in the front there, there's a QR code to Slido. We'll be using that throughout the symposium. So if you're not comfortable speaking, you can always submit a question through Slido, and then we can answer your question that way. But you had mentioned your previous experience doing safe routes to schoolwork. So the question is, how can the state encourage active transportation programs in schools to help, increase public health and physical education amongst students? So it's a little bit different than what you touched on, but maybe if you can just talk about working, within schools and how the state can be a better partner.
Yeah, it's a really good question. When we look at the safety data, we know that younger people are some of our most vulnerable. So people walking and biking are already vulnerable, and the people that are young and older are the most vulnerable. So focusing on school-related safety is really important. I'm not sure how we can better focus on schools. What I can say is that we're trying to move the department to a sort of a risk-based process where we look at safety from that lens instead of just where crashes have occurred, but where there may be risk. And I think when we bring that lens to our safety work, then the schools sort of pop up. So I hope that through the process that we're already taking on with moving to sort of proactive, systemic, risk-based programs, that we'll see schools sort of popping up as the places that are very important.
Thank you. All right, we got a good question on working with elected leaders to put in more bike lanes. This individual shared that, in their community, car parking continues to be a priority over safety. So could you maybe share examples, in your career of finding that balance so that all modes are being served on the facility?
Sure, and it's it's important. As I was saying, safety is a shared responsibility, and that's all of us here, but it's also our elected officials. And I think one of the, most powerful lessons that I've learned is that a lot of times it comes down to education. And so one of the things that I've tried to do in working, especially just coming off of an assignment at the California State Transportation Agency, which is sort of like the cabinet level organization at the state that oversees Caltrans and DMV, CHS, is that I'm trying to stop going into conversations with making assumptions that there's some wrongdoing, but really going in with an open mind that maybe it's just a lack of knowledge. And so I think the biggest recommendation that I have is to go into conversations like that. Elected officials are one of our most important groups to get on board. There's only so much we can do, like from the ground up. And so to go in and try to, educate and teach and then understand and learn, because maybe there are, a whole bunch of constituents who need this parking for some reason. Maybe there are good reasons to have it in certain places. Or maybe it is that there just hasn't been much intention or thought to it. Like I was saying in my earlier spiel, we have built the system for mobility, and our measure of success has been car efficiency for a long time. And so sometimes we have remnants of that past approach built into our system.
Thank you so much. And I've had a few questions about the Slido code. So it is ATPS 25. We'll make sure to maybe put that on the screen for our next session. All right, a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. I know Michael over there, I think, has identified someone, and we'll take a couple more from Zoom.
You'll earn your break eventually.
Hi, my name is Teresa. I'm a Safe Routes to School coordinator, and I just had a question about something you said earlier about accessibility and how when Caltrans does projects, you take accessibility into consideration. I'm just wondering who guides Caltrans on that? Is there a committee of people who deal with accessibility issues on a daily basis, or how do those decisions get made?
Yeah, so we have an Office of Civil Rights, and it includes one of their responsibilities is over the ADA program, and so it pretty squarely lives there. Obviously, they coordinate across the department with people in my group and safety and our traffic operations area. And so they're sort of the point, and that office is run by one of our deputy directors named David DeLuce. So he's really responsible, his program is responsible for sort of the guidance related to ADA.
I think I'm getting lots of questions here online. So, but one that seems to be getting a lot of upvotes from us. This participant is hearing lots about walking and biking. That's because we're at an active transportation symposium, so I'm glad you're hearing that. But they want to know how Caltrans is working across all modes to make sure that we have all ages and abilities facilities. So maybe for people who might not be as entrenched in active transportation as we are, if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And I tried to sort of cater my talking points to active transportation as we are at a active transportation symposium, but it is a very good point, and one that can't be lost. So we are, when we talk about safety at the department, we're talking about safety for all modes. We have plenty of programs, especially safety improvement programs that look at vehicle safety. In fact, we have many more programs that look at vehicle safety than we do at ped and bike, vulnerable road user safety at this point. It is very important that we are mindful about the context of the roadway in order to figure out sort of what our focus should be to improve safety. So I was mentioning earlier this matrix, and when we look at local areas transition or mobility, I think that's where it really comes out. So when we look at the mobility column, there we're really focusing on vehicle mobility and making sure, I guess my point is that making sure that we look at a roadway and really figure out how it's being used, and then plan and design around that. The new policy that I mentioned, the Joint Secretary's policy on road safety, that is safety for all modes. We have very clear mission and vision at the department that we are looking at all modes when we go about projects. I think the last thing I want to just add is that, like I was saying earlier, for so long we have designed for vehicles, for efficiency, for people in cars. And so, I think it's modal equity that we need to think about instead of racial equity sometimes, or other types of equity. So we need to make sure that we give a lift to those modal groups that historically have been underrepresented in our projects and our planning and our design.
I'm going to let Ellie be the final question asker. So I'll take our final in-person question over here.
First, I just wanted to say, I'm Kendi Vance. I'm the Caltrans District 2 Native American Liaison, and I also sit on the ATP TAC. I'm really ecstatic to hear about the road safety, the policy from the Secretary, and I just wanted to ask a little bit of elaboration from you about your realization or your epiphany moment about data, and how when it hit you about this data is possibly non-existent, not because there's not a problem, but because maybe we don't have a way of capturing it. And how with the ATP program, we saw a great evolution in this program. Every cycle, we have improved and tried to create more flexibility and a platform to be able to tell a story. And when I heard you say that you're partnering with SafeTrek and those types of things, the first 2 cycles of ATP didn't afford us to be able to tell a story at all. That safety question was 35 points, and it either made you or broke you. And we knew that. So by cycle 3, we were able to then take that anecdotal data and tell that story. And so I loved hearing you say that and talk about that, that epiphany moment of, wait, we need to actually be able to capture more. So my follow-up question to that is, do you see the department, Caltrans, also being able to move and adapt and be flexible in some of that more anecdotal information as opposed to hard, rigid data points? Like in ye olden times when we worked in warrants and we worked in trigger spots and we worked in heat index maps. Do you think that the department is going to be able to have more flexibility and latitude to not be so rigid and be able to look holistically at a road corridor or safety concerns or issues and be able to solve those in a preventative, proactive way instead of reactive?
I agree, first off, that the ATP program has made so many strides. I mean, in the last decade, it's become such an advanced program, and I think we're all so thankful for, there was a little bit of a funding cut last year, but now we're back strong, and I think, there's a lot of excitement that we need to share around that. So Caltrans announced a new director of transportation maybe a handful of months ago. Director El Tawansi has made a point to really focus on people. And I think that with that focus, we will have to, as a department, bring in data sets that we maybe historically haven't used. I can speak to safety, and I think there's a general recognition, especially among safety professionals, that crash data only tells a limited part of the story. And when we're talking about pet and bike safety, it's even less. We know that there's anecdotal underreporting of crash data. And so it's even more important when we're in the active transportation space to look beyond crash data. And as we transition to this more proactive approach, the preventative injury prevention sort of science that's called for in the Secretary's policy, that requires us to move to a risk-based process. And in order to get to a risk-based process, you have to have data sets that historically you haven't had. We have to look at, and we are piloting near-miss collection right now. We have a great contract with a telematics data provider so that we can see harsh braking, acceleration, deceleration, and use that sort of data in our safety programs to be able to say, we know that everybody is going a lot slower in this one area. What is going on to the roadway there? So I'd like to think that we're starting to make a shift in piloting or collecting other types of data. And so I do think that there's a lot of promise and that we will get to a place where we have enough data to sort of tell the whole story. And I hope that at some point we can really capture the sort of the perceived safety, because at the end of the day, the Secretary's policy is really focused on injury prevention and public health, and the feeling that you have when you travel is so much a part of what is, what makes a journey safe. So I hope we're able to capture that feeling at some point.
Sorry, Rachel. And I just want to make a plug for the UC Berkeley Safe Track Street Story tool, which many of you, I'm sure, have used, yes, in your ATP applications. So I think that's a really great way to provide that qualitative experience that someone has outside of the collision data that's often collected by cities and police departments and others. So special plug. Thank you, Julia and team. They're here today. But yeah, make sure you check out Street Story if you haven't already. Okay, last question. You are the Caltrans Chief Safety Officer, so people are wanting to know how they can work better with district staff to ensure that they're following the safe systems approach and not maybe focus so much on car-oriented design. So can you maybe talk about, now with this new policy, what is the rollout going to look like, and what can our attendees here expect when working with Caltrans?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things that we did recently, well, let me take a step back. So in 2020, the department decided we have a safe, we need to elevate safety and provide more of an urgency, and so they developed the chief safety officer position. So that was just 2020. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and there was a realization that we can't just have a chief safety officer in headquarters. So we are going to actually identify a chief safety officer in each district. So in some of our larger districts, we actually have someone whose title is chief safety officer. In some of the smaller districts, like District 2, we heard from earlier, have someone who has taken on that role as part of their responsibility. They are the person who, they're sort of our like tentacles out to the districts in order to try to sort of connect that high-level policy, not only the secretary's policy, but our department director's policy on safety to the day-to-day work of all of the people in the district. So it is a journey that we are on in order to have everybody across the department sort of make this shift that we're talking about to safe system, to think about vulnerable road users. So, I mean, I think the question was about how to work with the districts. I mean, I think it's a good thing to go through the district, like safety lead. The folks in headquarters safety can also connect you to the appropriate person. And we also have what we call a safe system lead now in every division and district. And so those are the people who are sort of the most safety minded. So essentially we have a district chief safety officer, but then also we realize they're like in the safety program. We also realize that everybody needs a role in safety. So design and construction and operation. So all of those divisions to have a safe system lead too. So we sort of like slice the department in different ways. And so there should be safety leads like everywhere you go. And they're intended to help do that translation. So be patient with us. It's a big shift. But I do feel that we are in the we are making that shift, and it's just going to take us some time.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.